Welcome to the Copper King Mine and Railroad. Today we're going to talk about B&G Yard and the demise of that yard. So stay tuned.
B&G Yard, then Demise. Everyone loves the train yard. The rows of systematic rails lined up evenly, the constant movement of trains in and out, the order of it all. Well, today we're going to talk about the B&G Yard, and then the demise of that yard. Trains and shovels made the mine successful, so successful that it will devour a whole mountain and create a huge pit, one of the largest in the world. Shovels loaded ore cars throughout the mine. Trains, approximately made up of 12 cars, would then work their way down the levels to the staging yard. Here they would be made up into large trains to be pulled to the mill. The first yard was the Denver and Rio Grande's Cuprum yard. So here's some pictures of that Cuprum yard. And that's on the low grade line or the high line from the Denver Rio Grande. This railroad line would falter. They just couldn't keep up with the volume of ore. So Utah Copper will build their own railroad, the Bingham and Garfield Railway. This line came in on the opposite side of the canyon. Now here's a picture of both railways. The B&G, or the Bingham and Garfield, to the far left, Denver Rio Grande's Cuprum Yard to the right. So now trains came down the mountain and staged at the B&G Yard. Early operations, that yard was on the south side of the Carfort Canyon, across that Carfort Bridge, or A-Line Bridge. Levels were named letters, starting with A and then working their way up the mountain like B, C, D, then on up. A level being the bottom of the mountain. For many years, its elevation was 6340. Now we had a video on the Carfort Bridge, and I show many pictures of that bridge. Anyway, as the mine expanded over the years, the yard moved north across that bridge to make up trains. Here's a few photos when B&G Yard was on the south side of the bridge. Then some early pictures of B&G Yard on the north side. This one you can see the mine offices at the top of the hill and the tram running up to it. Then look at this one with all the cars parked around it. Wow. And then the mine offices to the right. Warehouse number 1, and then there's more cars. Then a close-up of that warehouse number 1. The car repair shop was up here. Note the waste trains lined up to go inside there. The assay department. The oil house. Then here's a colorized postcard looking down on B&G Yard. My father was part of the history up at this B&G Yard. He started in 1947. Of course, he began on the track gang. That was entry-level job. His first day, they jerked him around all day long. They kept sending him to different gangs. They would say, pointing across the pit or levels below, "Your gang is over there or down there." His real gang was the first one he showed up to in the beginning of the day. Anyway, he only worked on the track gang for a few weeks. Then he got a bid to work in the oil house. Here's a picture of that early oil house. It was right next to the carpenter shop. Here's a picture of that carpenter shop. See all the wood stacked up there? This is where the big B&G train shop was. Here's a great picture of that big old train shop they had up there. This oil house was on the south side of the Carfort Bridge. Note the man sitting in front eating his lunch. No, it's not my dad. They will start using the Copperton Low Line May 12, 1948. This would be the new route to the mills. It will eliminate the B&G Railroad and that yard. Also, the mine was expanding this way. You can see this picture of the mine coming this way. The picture of the old shop, and then the next picture is that shop is all gone. The old B&G shop will be replaced with the new Dry Fork shop, and that would be in 1948. Here's some earlier pictures of them constructing the new Dry Fork shops. The oil house will stay up the B&G yard, but move north across the bridge to its new home. This area will still be referred to as B&G yard, although much of the activities will change here. Here's more pictures of the buildings up in B&G yard. There was that warehouse number 1, the main office building. The tram facilities was in the back of that building. The shifter repair shop, that was the old car repair shop. The assay office, the electrical field office. Now this was the old B&G depot building, part of it anyway. The lineman material shed. Also, they were using this old B&G line to move waste materials out to the A dump line. Note the waste train moving past the shifter shop. And then the oil house. My dad and fellow workers in front of the oil house. From the left, Hudson, Vern, my dad, Patrick, and Raymond Marks, the foreman. That was to the right. As an oil house man, he had many different responsibilities: fueling the track shifters and track machines, ordering oil, gas, diesel fuel, grease, kerosene for the whole mining operation, making sure the shovels had plenty of grease, trucks and service vehicles had fuel or gas. Here's a list my dad made up of the oil house responsibilities. Here's a picture of Cheryl Schrogan, head of security and a good friend of my dad's. He'd visit my dad many times up at the oil house. Maybe he's up here getting his truck fueled up. Thanks to him, we have many wonderful pictures of the mine, some even in this video. Oil was important to lubricate this mine's vast operation. Here's some pictures of the inside of the oil house, and sorry, the quality is really poor. This was his work for many years. I think there were only 4 or 5 people working in the oil house at any given time. In the 1960s, his boss had a heart attack. He would have to retire. My dad would take over his responsibilities and his job. He did this for years and years, keeping the mine running. When truck haulage came in 1963, he had to keep up with the increased amount of diesel fuel that was needed. They built a 1 million gallon fuel tank at Yosemite and then a 2 million gallon fuel tank at 6800. Now, he would have to go out and climb up on top of these tanks to check the levels to make sure they coincide with his estimates. The mid-1970s, trains converted from electric power to diesel locomotive power, with need for more diesel fuel. By this time, diesel fuel was the lifeblood of the mine. He had many lists of vendors and contacts to keep the mine supplied. Here's some pictures of his lists, what he kept. With all these added responsibilities, he would ask if he could become the foreman of the oil house. The answer was always no. You see, my dad didn't have his high school diploma, and so they wouldn't let him be the foreman. So occasionally, they would send over a guy to be the foreman, but he would never work out or he wouldn't stay long enough. So my dad just kept doing his job. Now, my dad was very conscientious. He did his job well. Here's some lists I found of my dad's. Diesel fuel wind chill table. Here's a department of use of oil and grease. Here's work order numbers and departments. A list of rail haulage fuel tanks, oil solvent tanks, distribution of grease, rail, and truck haulage shovel and equipment, standing orders from vendors, rail haulage fuel tank amounts. Here's a suggestion he made to improve fuel flow. That was in the 1970s. It earned him $480, so that was pretty cool. These things will set up for what happens next. The story continues. So now we come to the 1980s, and the mine is expanding. Still moving this way. B&G Yard will now have to be removed. They told my dad they were moving him down and his department to the dry fork shops. So day after day, he would check in down at the dry fork shops to see if they had a place for him. They pretty much just ignored him. No phone, no desk, nothing. This just continued. I'm going to pause here a minute and show you pictures of the demise of B&G Yard. Now this was in the early 1980s. Pretty much the same buildings we've seen, but now they're just being emptied. Here's the office building, or the mine administration building it was called. You can see this one shows that tram house right in the back. Here's warehouse number 1. This building was called the Material Storage Barn. Here's the electrical field repair office, and that was the old Bingham and Garfield depot. The assay offices, that was the old Gibson commercial warehouse. And the shifter repair shop, that was the old car repair shop, and it was that long building sitting there in B&G Yard. And the oil house. Back to my dad's story. My dad did his job for so long and so good for so many years that what he did went unnoticed. Well, he finally had enough. He told them that he was going on vacation until they figured it out. He had 5 weeks of vacation time coming to him and planned to take it all at once. In this limbo state he had been in, he was unable to call vendors and keep up with the heavy demands of fuel and related supplies. He had a trailer house up in Provo Canyon and was going to spend his time up there. He told me not to tell anyone where he was at, and he went on vacation. Now, I was working at the mine at that time also. Supplies started to run low. Diesel fuel was becoming alarmingly low. They didn't even know who to call to order fuel or anything. The mine management did start to call me, asking if I knew where my dad was at. I lied and says I didn't know. Finally, one of his close friends called me and says, I know you're not supposed to tell me where your dad is at, but if I was to go up to his trailer, would I be on the right track? They got my dad back to work with a nice new office and phones. They even put him in the clerical department with a lot more money. Now, they were real interested in what he did and how he did it. And they saw how imperative it was to train people to do his job. He will retire in a few more years, though. There was a few months I was able to ride to work with my dad. That was pretty fun. When I was on the track gang, a few times I was working up in A level, and then I would walk up to B&G Yard to see my dad. My father is long gone now. It's just a precious memory. I love that old B&G Yard. Now the whole place is gone, devoured by the mine. The spot where it would have been, you can see just above some of my family's heads. So that's the B&G Yard, and then the demise of that yard.